melech haolam asher natan achivina lavchin ben yom uven laila Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzalmo Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorin Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzokef kefufim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka aretz al hamayim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kol tzorki Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin metzadik gaver Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanotan la'ayef koach Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam Zir chatov Neinu chayim echon Necheinu l'chesed urachamim B'nechra v'nekoro Einu v'tigna leinu chasidim tovim Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasidim tovim le'amo Yisrael Here it's open left. Ashreinu matov hakenu manayim goralenu mayafa yerushatenu Ashreinu shanakim maskimim umarvim erev boker brambim b'mayim b'chol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Kadesh Shemcha Makdashei Shemecha V'Kadesh Shechov Olamecha V'Shuach Katarim V'Tagbia Karnenu Baruch Atah Mekadesh Shemcha Barabim Adonai Eloheinu Ma'abed V'tomen lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'lehavotenu shetitan alkeinu b'tortecha b'demidal shal Aaron hakohen ochev shalom b'nei shalom ochev et habriot u'karban l'Torah page 72 hayom yom Shabbat ki ne'avech Adonai Odinavum b'sevad shenim brananim liuli ki asharonai tzuriv la tabo page 81 Mizmor shir Elecha Adonai V'el Adonai et Hanan Elecha Adonai Ekra V'el Adonai et Hanan Shema Adonai V'honeni Adonai Ozer li Shema Adonai V'choneni Adonai Ozer li Hi, 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 Hafachta misbili lemecholi pitakta sekividas reini simcha lamanya zameka kavod v'lo yidom Adonai Elohai leolam odeka. 83, please rise. Baruch she'amar v'yaholam, Baruch hu, Baruch Hoseh Bereshit, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Omer v'yoseh, Baruch hu, Baruch Gozer Kayem, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Mechem al haaretz, Baruch hu, Baruch Mechem al habriot, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Mesalem Zakar Tov Lireav, Baruch hu, Baruch Ela'ad V'kayam Lanetzach, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Bodei Umatzil, Baruch hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Adonai. Yachid Helmi Melch Meshabach Umbrei Adei Adshmo Hagadol Baruch Adonai Melch Mechlal Batishbach Ki kol yamim hedilim Adonai Shemayim Asa. Let's jump to 92. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chazdo. Hodu l'Elohei ha'Elohim ki le'olam chazdo. Hodu l'Adonai ha'Adonim ki le'olam chazdo. Le'osei niflahot gidolot levado ki le'olam chazdo. Le'osei hashamayim bidvuna ki le'olam chazdo. Le'kal ha'aretz al hamayim ki le'olam chazdo. Noten lechem lechol basar ki leolam chazdo hodu le'el hashamayim ki leolam chazdo. Continue on page 95. Adonai melech. Mikalot mayim, mayim rabim, adirim, adirim, mishparei yam. Mikalot mayim, mayim rabim, adirim, adirim, mishbarei yam. Adir b'marom hanaynay, adir b'marom hanaynay, adir b'marom Adonai, adir b'marom hanaynay, adir b'marom hanaynay, adir b'marom Adonai. Eidotek nanu meod lebarkad avat kodesh Adonai leorech yami. Hikavod Adonai lemesh machmashav shishim elach mantad elam mimizrach shemesh ad mevo. Adonai shimcha leolam Adonai zichach. Vehu rachum yakaper b'von. Vehu rachum yakaper b'von lo ship bechabal aship poglo k'hamato Adonai Hoshem Melech Yanenu v'yahom karenu ashrei yoshvei beitecha oje halelucha oje halelucha ashrei ham shechachalo ashrei ham shadonai Eloham. Tehilat Adonai daber pi v'yorech kol basar shem kochol olam v'nachnu v'rechem et olam. Hallelujah. Adonai matira surim, Adonai pokech ivrim, Adonai tzokek kufifim, Adonai ocheb tzadikim, Adonai shomer et gerim, yitom va'amana yoded u'rederach yeshihim yabet. Yimloch Adonai lacham l'chayit yom l'dor v'ador. Hallelujah. Continue on page 100 in the middle. Hallelu, hallelu, el bikojo, hallelu, birki ahozo, hallelu, vigvorotav, hallelu, kirav gudlo, hallelu, bete, ekash shofar, Hallelujah, Benevilekinor. Hallelujah, Betovu Machol. Hallelujah, Beninim Bilgava. Hallelujah, Betiltzle Shama. Hallelujah, Betiltzle Truha. Kol Anishama. Tilaleluya. Kol Anishama. Tilaleluya. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael Niflo Levado V'Rech Shem Kavodo Le'Olam B'Yimalei Kavod Et Kol Haaretz Amen V'Amen. Rech David 101, please rise. Tahu Adonai Elohim Asher Bacharta B'Avraham V'Tor Meor Kastim Sasam V'Sam Tashmo Avraham U'Matzat Elevavo Ne'eman Lefanecha. V'Yabachakla Lifnehem V'Havru B'Toch Hayam V'Yabasha V'Hem Hishlach Tavim Salot Kamo Heaven B'Mayim Azim. V'Yar Yisrael Et Yad HaGedolah Asher Adonai B'Yitzrayim Am Et Adonai B'Aminu B'Adonai Moshe Avdo. Ozi Zimratya Vayahi Yeshua Ozi Zimratya Vayahi Yeshua Ozi Zimratya Vayahi LeYeshua Ozi Zimratya Vayahi LeYeshua. Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed Ki L'Adonai Hamlucha U'Moshel Bagoyim L'Shim B'Char L'Shpot Et Char Esav V'Hayta L'Adonai Hamlucha V'Hayad Al-Malch Arts B'Yom Hahu Yadonai Echad U'Shemo Echad Yadadai Hayadadai Hayadadai Nishmat kochai tivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu zichrecha malkeinu tamid min haolam v'ad olam ata el yanai yanai yadadai hayai yadadai hay yadai yadai yadadai hayai yadadai yai. Ilufinu malei shirat kayam ulshonenu rina v'yadenu frusot kenishre shamayim braglenu kalot kayalot. Ilufinu malei shirat kayam ulshonenu rina v'yadenu frusot Kenishre shamayim braglenu kalot kayalot. En anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha ulvarech et shimcha melech malchei amlachim melech malchei amlachim. En anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha ulvarech et shimcha melech malchei amlachim. Barchi nafsi et Adonai v'kol kravai ektem kojo hal bitatu motu zecha hagadol b'kvod shemecha daidai Hagibor lanetzach vehanora benorotecha hamelech hayoshem al kisei arambani sadayai. Shochinad marom v'kadosh shemon. B'fi yesharim tital olav divrei tzadikim titparach uvilshon chasidim titromam uvkerev kadoshim titkadash umakalot v'vivot amcha beit Yisrael. Kenu kol yitzavim u'fonecha l'nelayim v'ahevatenu l'adol ha'lel Shabbat
לפועל ורומם להדל לברך, להלל קלס, על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך, ישתבח שמך, לעד מלכנו. ברכות והודות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלפי העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי. Dominion. Thank you. This is when my kids find out I don't have eyes in the back of my head. Thank you, Father, Elenu, Bilam Azevian, Zulatam Alkenu, Lechayalamim Abba, Ephes Piltecha, Golenu, Lemotra Mashiach, Vienu Melach, Moshiach Layat, with Yat Ametim. El Adon al kol amasim balokum volach v'fikon nishama gadlu v'tuvo malei olam da'at utvuna sovavim oto Amid Gael chayot hakodesh v'nedar bechavod ala mekava zechut u'mishol lifnei piso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chivodo טובים מאוד שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת ובינה ובשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו מפיקים נוגה נועל זיוון בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים באורה עושים בהם הרצון קונם פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמור צלב ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש וישרח אורה והקים צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרון כי יפארתו גדולה שרופים ויופנים וחיות הקודש כולם אוהבים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים וכולם עושים בימה ריצה קונם וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה בשירה וזמרה מברכים משבחים מפארים ומריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול הגיבור ונורא הקדוש הוא וכולם מקבלים עליהם העול מלכות שמיים זה מזה נותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח בסופה ברורה ונעימה קדושה כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות בארץ כבודו והאופנים והעיר הקודש ברעש גדול מתנסים למצרפים למותם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו איתנו קדוש על ציון תאיר ונזכך לנו מאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצא המרון אהבה רבה Otanu Adonai Eloheinu, Chem Lagidora V'Terach, Amalta Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Ba'avor Avotenu, Shabbat Kuvecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Vatilamdechu Kechaim, Ken Techanenu Tamdenu, Avinu Ha'avarachaman, Amrachem Rachem Aleinu, V'tein b'libeinu le'avin, le'avinu l'ashkir l'shmoa, le'omod u'le'lamed, l'shmoa ve'la'asod. O kayem et kol divrei Talmud Toratecha b'yava, ve'harerenu v'toratecha, v'dabek lebeinu v'mitzvotecha, ve'yached levavenu le'ava u'yira et shemecha, ve'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, ve'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, ki v'shem kadshecha Agadol anora batachnu, nagila v'nismecha, v'shuatecha. Avenu shalom ve'arbat kanfot ha'aretz v'tolechenu k'mil yatzenu, ki ha'melech bo yeshuat atah, uvonu v'chata mikol am v'lashon, v'kerabtanu l'shemo ha'gadol salam yamel adol l'cha yedcha b'yava, Baruch atah Adonai, Abocher b'yamo Yisrael, b'yava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Yavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol miyodecha, v'hayu adorim ha'ela, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom al levavecha, v'shirantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'beitecha, uvleftecha b'derech, uvshapecha uvkumecha, ukshatam liot al yodecha, ve'hayu l'totafot b'neinecha, uvchavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvisharecha. V'dor hu kayam u'shmo kayam, v'hiso nachon malchuto v'emunato l'yad kayam. Emet shatu Adonai Eloheinu v'Avotenu, Malkeinu melech Avotenu, Goleinu goel Avotenu, Yotzchainu Yeshuatenu podenu matzilenu me'olam shemecha, Ein Elohim zulatecha, Ezrat Avotenu atahu me'olam.
The hymn will be on the bottom of page 114, followed by the Amidah, which will begin together on page 115b. Ram v'nisa, Gadol v'nora, Mashpil geim,
ומחביאך שפלים, מוציא אסירים, ופודה ענבים ועוזר דלים, ועונה לעמו את שבם אליו, תהילות לאל עליון, ברוך ומבורך משה וישראל, לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ויאמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. שירה חדשה שבחו גאולים, לשמך שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופתח את עמך יהודה וישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמון, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני גואל ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanora El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot, ומביא גואל בני בניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר פקיר משיח ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ומוריד שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים את אימתו להושיע, מוריד אתה מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמנות על חיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. מקדש שמך כשם שמקישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר. קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול עד דבר חזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים למצרפים, למותם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך יבוא אדוני ממקומו, ממקום קומו כן תפי ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב ימינו יום ועד תשכון. תתקדש ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ויהי Yedei David Mashiach Tzidkecha. Yimloch and Eliyalam Ha'etzion L'dor V'dor, hallelujah. L'dor V'dor, Negid God Lechol Netzach, Netzachim Kadesh Shata Naktiv, Shivchach Aleinu Mipinu Lo Yemush Lelam V'ed, Ki Al Melech Adol V'Kadosh Ata, Baruch Atah Adonai El HaKadosh. Continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 138. Yitkadav Yitkadash Shemei Rabba, Me'amon Divrei Frutei V'yamlet Malchutei, B'chayechonu V'yamechonu V'chay Dechol Bet Yisrael, Ba'agala V'zman Kariv Yimeru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Me'olam Me'omayah. Yiparach V'yishtavach V'yipar V'yitron V'yitnasev V'yitadav V'yitalev V'yitalav Shmei Kodesha, B'rechu, Le'elam en kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata damiran b'yalma v'yimeru, Amen. Titkabel tzorchon v'chon l'chol Yisrael, kadam v'chon divishmaya v'yimeru, Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemai v'chaim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru, Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru, Amen.
On page 139. Any takers? Yeah. Bakasha, page 139.
En kamocha be'Elohim Adonai ve'en kamasecha malchutecha malchut kol amim u'memshatecha v'chol dor v'chol dor Adonai melech Adonai melech Adonai Eloh v'lam v'en Adonai Yosem Yitain Adonai Yevarech et Amo v'shalom Al harachamim ekiv v'tzonka
on page 696, verse 15, Vayikra 19:15. Parshat Kedoshim is the Torah at its most urgently concerned about creating a just and equitable and kind society, laws about not taking advantage of the disabled and not taking bribes and not worshiping idols and rising before the elderly and loving your neighbor as yourself. All core mitzvot, as Rabbi Akiva said, Zechlal Gadol B'Torah, are found in Parshat Kedoshim. We will have more to say about it as we move along. For now, again, we will begin our reading on page 696, verse 15. Vayazor vayagin vayoshia lechol achosim bo v'nomar amen. Hakol havu godel lelohenu utnu kavod lo Torah kohen krav ya'amod. Ephraim Yoni Yeshaya. Ben Moshe Nachman HaKohen. V'Sara Baruch Shenatan Torah Lemo Yisrael B'Kedushato V'atem Avekim B'Rechem Chaim Kulchem Hayom. And we need a Gabbai Sheni.
He's coming right back. He's just getting a mask.
Oh.
Since he's getting so close to me, I asked him to get a mask.
Thank you, Joel.
All right, just give me a minute to find this too.
Good Shabbos. Welcome.
Yeah, right there.
Baruch Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam
Baruch
Va'ed.
Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat, lo tisaf p'nei dal, ve'lo tedar p'nei gadol, v'tzedek tishpot amitecha, lo telech rachil ve'amecha, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, ani Adonai, lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, הוכיח תוכיח את עמיתך ולא תישא עליו חטא. לא תיקום ולא תיטור את בני עמך ואהבת לרעך כמוך אני אדוני.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת. חיי עולם אתה בתוכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Shabbat shalom.
Page 697, verse 19. Ya'amod. David Meir ben Shlomo Halevi. L'Aliyah Hashanit.
Baruch Hu es Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'cha banu mikol ha'amim, v'nasan lanu es Torah. Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. את חוקותיי תשמורו, בהמתך לא תרביע כלאיים, שדך לא תזרע כלאיים, ובגד כלאיים שעטנז לא יעלה עליך. כי ישכב את אישה שכבת זרע, והיא שפחה נחרפת לאיש, והופתך לא נפדת, או חופשה לא ניתן לך, ביקורת תהיה, לא יומתו כי לא הוא פשע. והביא את אשמו לאדוני אל פתח אוהל מועד, אל אשם, וכיפר עליו הכהן, ואל האשם לפני אדוני, על חטאתו אשר חטא, ונסלח לו מחטאתו אשר חטא.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher nosan lonu Torah shemesh v'chayelim nata b'zachenu. Baruch atah Adonai noseinu Torah.
Amen.
Page 698, verse 23. Ya'amod. Yitzchak Uri ben Shlomo l'Aliyah ha'shlishit.
Take your talit and just touch and kiss. Touch it to the parchment.
Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Olam Va'ed. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'tanat lanu es toraso. Baruch et Adonai et nosein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'chi tavo'u el ha'aretz untatem kol eitz ma'achal va'araltem orlato et piryo 3 shanim yeh lachem arelim lo ye'achel ובשנה הרביעית יהיה כל פריו קודש הילולים לאדוני, ובשנה החמישית תאכלו את פריו להוסיף לכם תבואתו, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. לא תאכלו על הדם, לא תנחשו ולא תאוננו, לא תקיפו פאת ראשכם ולא תשחית את פאת זקנך בסרט לנפש, לא תיתנו בבשרכם וכתובת קעקע לא תיתנו בכם, אני אדוני. אל תחלל את ביתך והזנותה ולא תזנה הארץ ומלאה הארץ זימה. את שבתותי תשמורו ומקדשי תיראו, אני אדוני. אל תפנו אל האובות ואל הידעונים, אל תבקשו לטומאה בהם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. מפני שיבה תקום והדרת פני זקן ויראת מאלוהיך, אני אדוני.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah emes b'chayei olam nata v'sochinu. Baruch atah Adonai nosein HaTorah.
Number 4, Ya'amod. Yom Yitzchak ben Tzvi, Aliyah HaRevi'it. I'm going to pause for a second and just point out, sort of open up a brief, one or two very brief conversations. One I just want to point out, sort of in honor of Yom Ha'atzmaut. So we just read Lifnei Sevat Takum, which is you should rise before an old person. And if you've ever been to Israel, you know that that's what's on the bus, right? You know, like won't you give up your seat for the elderly? It's actually a pasuk, and it's among, for me, and I've said this before, it's among for me the most moving things about visiting Israel and about the reality of Yom Ha'atzmaut that the Torah imagines. Right? The Torah imagines that being an Israelite is urgently a part of your daily lives. Right? If there's one parsha that says it really loud and clear, Kedoshim is saying loud and clear that being an Israelite is not supposed to just touch your life for 25 hours from Friday night to Saturday night. No. It touches every corner of your life, from how you appoint justices to the court, and how you treat the elderly, and how you don't take bribes, and so on and so forth. And It's very extraordinary that we as Jews live in a moment in history when, in fact, the original purpose of the verse, which was to organize society in a just and equitable way, appears on the walls of public buses. Lifnei Seivat Takum, right? It really is extraordinary and moving. So look out for that next time you're in Israel. The other thing I wanted to sort of open as a discussion is, so Kiddushim is filled with laws. Many of them, I think, extremely relatable in an immediate way, right? Which is a departure in some ways from what we've seen in Vayikra to this point, which is mostly laws about sacrifice and things which are sort of, we need to dig a little bit more to find, what they're saying to us today. These are all very relatable. One of them, which, I don't know, may or may not be, but which we just read, is don't inquire after ghosts. Okay? Don't try to inquire after ghosts. And I'm curious, the Torah doesn't tell us why. I'm curious if you guys think that's, why do you think the Torah forbids that?
Well, what does it mean to inquire after it?
I assume it means to go to like a medium and, you want to talk to X, Y, or Z ghost. You say, hey, call them up, however you do that. I assume that's what that means.
So I have a thought.
Yeah.
Especially my last name being Casper, I think I can speak.
Good call. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think when the person is gone, it's important to remember them, but we also need to move on with our lives. So, in our hearts, they're always there, and you have all the memories of what they've done and what they've been there for you, especially like our parents. But that's in the past, and we have to look at the present and the future and move on. So
Yeah, I think that's very beautiful. And I think it's, if you think about the context of Kiddushim, which is so much about creating a living society, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think there's just some mysteries in life that we're just not privy to, the information, and that we should just, like I said, hold them as sacred, and that we're just not meant to know everything. We're just trying to figure it out. We shouldn't force the issue or provoke or and like I said, just respect and leave, what is.
Yes. So there's a verse, Yeshev b'Seiter Elyon, which literally means dwelling in the uppermost secrets. But there's a midrash that says Yeshev b'Seiter Elyon. The subject is God. God actually dwells in secrets. God lives in secret cracks and secret corners of the universe and of the self. And I think that's interesting as well. Yeah. Any other thoughts about this? Yeah.
Well, a ghost being a non-entity, something that you can look at and talk to but not know, could be also considered a god.
Could be considered what?
A god.
Oh, yeah, so there's a concern about ancestor worship, which definitely could be a piece of what's going on in the Torah's context. Yeah, absolutely.
Like an icon or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which would have been, which ancestor worship, as we know, is a prominent world religious tradition, which the Torah definitely doesn't endorse. Are there any other thoughts about this?
This question, does that mean that it's inappropriate, and a lot of people do this, to sort of engage in an imaginary conversation with an ancestor? You come to an issue, what would my mother think? So you go through this sort of process.
I don't think so, because of something, at least, it could be, right? It could be interpreted that way. And at least on the face of it in the Torah, I'm not sure it's entirely clear, based on something I'll share in a second in terms of how this particular halacha was interpreted later. I think probably not. I think it's probably referring to sort of the organized practice of going to a medium to sort of really conjure up the dead, as Shaul does, and conjures up when he goes to the witch of Endor, which some of us have learned together fairly recently, and brings up Samuel. You're not supposed to do that. Yeah, Mario, go on.
No, I was just thinking more, also like tarot cards, and same sort of thing of trying to go into the other world. Agatha Christie, I don't know, I always think about some of the Agatha Christie stories or those type of mysteries from the British mysteries, where they were always going to mediums and.
Mediums, yeah. I mean, in the 19th century, spiritualism was a popular thing among certain corners of society. So you shouldn't use tarot cards, by the way.
Oh.
And you shouldn't. None of you should have Ouija boards. You shouldn't use either. I mean, from a Jewish perspective. I mean, I don't know if you had this again. You shouldn't use those. So I'll share just two things about this, which what I've always found to be a very charming and in some ways poignant machloket, disagreement between Rambam, Maimonides, and Ramban, Nachmanides. And they have a disagreement about why the Torah forbids this. Rambam says the reason why the Torah forbids talking to ghosts is because it's not possible. And, Rambam, an art rationalist, and he basically says that anyone who tells you that they can talk to ghosts is preying on your vulnerabilities. And of course you want to talk to your mother who you miss and love, and of course you want to talk to these people you've lost, but you can't because it's not possible. And the Torah, in keeping with everything else that's going on in Kiddushim, is interested in creating just and equitable society. And these people are predators. And they're preying on people's grieving, and they're preying on mourners, and so it's forbidden. That's what Rambam says. Ramban, who was a big Kabbalist, in addition to being an important Torah commentator, says, no, of course it's possible. We Kabbalists do it all the time. It's just extremely dangerous. Because the spirit world is complex and powerful, and it's dangerous to over-inquire into secrets which you're not ready for. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that. This has always struck me as sort of a very charming and interesting machloket, which gets at some poignant things about what it's like to lose people and what it's like to think about loss in society. And I don't know which one I prefer, but I sort of carry both of them kind of with me. Yeah,
Ramban justify we Kabbalists do it all the time when the Torah says you can't.
The Kabbalists do. The Kabbalists do a lot of things that the Torah says or apparently the Torah says you can. He would probably say that the Torah is speaking to normal people. It's about society, and it's about how normal non-mystical masters should behave, and that's what you probably say. You probably say this is exoteric law for most people, but for those of us who are really, really initiate, there's a deeper layer to all of this. He would say something probably almost exactly like that. Maria.
But then either you can or you can't. Not can, like from a abstract way, but either concretely, either you can, and that there is the spirit world to talk with, or it doesn't exist and it's a bunch of nonsense, which I've always been raised to believe.
That it was nonsense.
That it's all nonsense. That it's people, mediums kind of make it happen or whatever, whatever. But if it's in here, like Andrew was just saying, there's got to be something. It was obviously very popular to do augury and things. It's been for millions of years. People have wanted to inquire of the dead.
Right.
So the question is that if it's in there, there's got to be something to it, maybe? I don't know. Just saying.
Maybe. I think what we get one more, and then we'll move on. I think what we don't know about the universe is considerable. Even with the mighty hand of science sort of changing our lives. What we don't know about the universe is considerable, and I think it's worth remembering. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's some thread of it that relates to the idea of God is within, and not to look out, to look inside.
That's interesting. So that maybe ghosts and spirits such as they exist are preserved inside the living. Is that kind of what you're?
No, to look for comfort within, rather than from some outside source.
Like if you're trying to find an answer to something, you should just look inside.
Oh, basically you're looking because basically why are you bothering the? Basically what Samuel actually says when Saul calls him and he says, "Why are you bothering me? I already told you. You already know it. You're looking in the wrong places." Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Like, why would we assume that the ghosts are necessarily wise? I mean, it's like if we didn't understand our parents when they were alive, why would we, why would, right? I mean, that's interesting. Yeah. Except for Hamlet's father. All right, we'll continue with the reading. We are on the fourth Aliyah. We're on page 700, verse 33.
Thank you. Okay.
Baruch hu Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'chi yagur itecha ger be'artechem lo tonu oto ke'ezrach mikem yeh lachem hagar itechem ve'ahavta lo kamocha ki gerim heitem be'eretz Mitzrayim Ani Adonai Elohechem lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat b'midah b'mishkal u'b'mshura mozne tzedek avne tzedek eifat tzedek v'hin tzedek yeh lachem Ani Adonai Elohechem אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, ושמרתם את כל חוקותיי ואת כל משפטיי, ועשיתם אותם אני אדוני.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'totenu Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Number 5. Ta'amod. Miriam bar Avraham Basara Leliyah HaChamishit. 701 chapter 20.
Oh, Mishabel?
Yes. We'll pause for a moment and include Mishberach for the Cholim. As always, I will read the names on our list, and then folks are invited to rise and add other names of those for whom you are praying this morning. Misheberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarivka Rachel V'Leah Uvivarech Virafei Et Zipporah Bat Yita, Vet Rita Vasquez, Vet Avram Ben An, Vet Leah Nachama Bat Rachel, Vet Daniel Ben Naomi, Vet Liva Bat Crandall, Vet Peril Basha Bat Chia, Vet Dov Yosef Ben Yetta, Vet David Ben Chava, Vet Josephine Arkwright, Vet David Ben Yisrael, Vet Paula Silverman, Vet Adina Bat Liorit, Vet Ann Perlman, Vet Eitan Ben Esther, Vet Esther Bat Bela, Vet Mordechai Yosef Ben Gita Yaakova, Vet Chana Yehudit Bat Esther, Vet Tina Casper, Vet Ida Sperano, Vet Samuel Chafetz, Vet Iris Kempf, Vet Brian Stein, Vet David Michael Ben Gila Aliza, Vet Chaim Esser Ben Yosef, Vet Yisrael David Ben Mira, Vet Esther Bat Elka, Vet Emily Greenhouse, Vet Pecha Bat Yiska, Vet Chris Spencer, Vet
Summer Keith.
Chana Bas Avram Basara, Albert Marin, Yvette Marin. Yosef Ben Yisrael Aron.
Shmuel Ben Chaya.
Anyone joining us online? HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimlei Rachamim Aleim Lachazikam Ulerapotam Vayishlach Lameira Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shar Chol Yisrael Shabbat Himilizok Refuah Krova Alavo Ashta Bagalai Zman Kariv V'no Mohar Amen.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarah.
Baruch HaMavarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור ואל בני ישראל תאמר איש איש מבני ישראל ומן הגר בישראל אשר ייתן מזרעו למולך מות יומת עם הארץ ירגמו באבן ואני אתן את פניי באיש ההוא והכרתי אותו מקרב עמו כי מזרעו נתן למולך למען טמא את מקדשי ולחלל את שם קודשי ואם הלם ילימו עם הארץ את עיניהם מן האיש ההוא ותיטול מזרעו למולך לבלתי המית אותו ושמתי אני את פניי באיש ההוא ובמשפחתו והכרתי אותו ואת כל הזונים אחריו לזנות אחרי המולך מקרב עמם והנפש אשר תפנה אל האובות ואל הידעונים לזנות אחריהם ונתתי את פניי באיש ונתתי את פניי בנפש ההיא והכרתי אותו מקרב עמו והתקדשתם והייתם קדושים כי אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. יישר כוח, שבת שלום.
יעמוד אליהו בן יצחק לעלייה השישית, page 700, verse 8.
Baruch hu et Adonai havarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bocha bono mikol ha'amim v'notan lanu et toraso. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
אמן. ושמרתם את חוקותיי ועשיתם אותם. אני אדוני מקדישכם כי איש איש אשר יקלל את אביו ואת אמו מות יומת. אביו ואמו קילל דמיו בו ואיש אשר ינאף את אשת איש אשר ינאף את אשת רעהו מות יומת הנואף והנואפת ואיש אשר ישכב את אשת אביו ערוות אביו קהילה מות יומתו שניהם דמיהם בם ואיש אשר ישכב את כלתו מות ימתו שניהם תבל עשו דמיהם בם ואיש אשר ישכב את זכר משכבי אישה תועבה עשו שניהם מות ימתו דמיהם בם ואיש אשר ייקח את אישה ואת אמה ואמה היא באש ישרפו אותו ואת הן ולא תהיה זימה בתוככם ואיש אשר ייתן שחובתו בבהמה מות יומת ואת הבהמה תהרגו ואישה אשר תקרב אל כל בהמה לרבעה אותה, והרגת את האישה ואת הבהמה, מות יומתו דמיהם בם, ואיש אשר ייקח את אחותו בת אביו ובת אמו, וראה את ערוותה, והיא תראה את ערוותו חסד הוא, ונכרתו לעיני בני עמם ערוות אחותו, כי לה עוונו יישא. ואיש אשר ישכב את אישה דבה, וגילה את ערותה, את מקורה הארה, והיא גילתה את מקור דמיה, ונכרתו שניהם מקרב עמם. וערוות אחות אמך ואחות אביך לא תגלה, כי את שארו הארה עוונם יישאו. ואיש אשר ישכב את דודתו, ערוות דודו גילה, חטאם יישאו, ערבים ימותו. ואיש אשר ייקח את אשת אחיו נידה היא, ערוות אחיו גילה, ערבים יהיו. ושמרתם את כל חוקותי ואת כל משפטי, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תקיא אתכם הארץ אשר אני מביא אתכם שמה לשבת בה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם לטפס אחינו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן.
Yisrael v'Sarah al Aliyah HaShavi'it.
Page 703, verse 32. 22.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bochar banu mikol ha'amim v'notan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. ולא תלכו בחוקות הגוי אשר אני משלח מפניכם, כי את כל אלה עשו ועקוץ בם. ואומר לכם, אתם תירשו את אדמתם, ואני אתננה לכם לרשת אותה ארץ זבת חלב ודבש. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הבדלתי אתכם מן העמים, והבדלתם בין הבהמה הטהורה לטמאה, ובין העוף הטמא לטהור, ולא תשקצו את נפשותיכם בבהמה ובעוף. ובכל אשר תלמוס האדמה אשר הבדלתי לכם לטמא, והייתם לי קדושים, כי קדוש אני אדוני, ואבדיל אתכם מן העמים להיות לי. ואיש או אישה כי יהיה בהם עוף, או ידעוני מות ומתו באבן, ירגמו אותם דמיהם בם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishashkoach mazal tov. Shabbat shalom.
Please rise.
Yitgada v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Yamad yivarak yirutei v'yamlich lachutei. V'chai yechon yom echon u'chayelech beit Yisrael. Yehei Shemei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Le'olam Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnasei V'yitadar V'yitameh V'yithalal Shemech T'kudsher B'richu Le'yela Min kol birchata V'shirata T'ufechata Nechamacha Ta'amiram be'amah Ve'imru Amen.
Ya'amod Zev Meir ben
Sephora Reuben.
Sephora ben Reuben L'Aliyah HaMaftir.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'char mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'hivdaltem בין הבהמה הטהורה לטמאה ובין העוף הטמא לטהור ולא תשקצו את נפשותיכם בבהמה ובעוף ובכל אשר ירמוס האדמה אשר הבדלתי לכם לטמא והייתם לי קדושים כי קדוש אני אדוני ואבדיל אתכם מן העמים להיות לי לאיש או אישה כי יהיה בהם אוב או ידעוני מות יומתו באבן ירגמו אותם דמיהם בם.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shekoach Ya'amdu HaMagbiya V'ha Golel Golelet Gol HaKahal V'zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei Israel Al Pi Adonai V'yad Moshe Torah 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 Tziva lanu Moshe Torah 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 Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Morash Gehilad Yaakov, Morash Gehilad Yaakov, Morash Gehilad Yaakov. Torah tziva lanu Moshe ki mitzvot
Hashem Yerushalayim Hagim Zion Tetzei Torah Udo Hashem Yerushalayim Ay for Parshat Kedoshim is from the book of Amos, which begins on page 706. Interestingly and importantly, while Kedoshim is all about how special the Israelites are and how unique they are and how beloved of God they are, Amos strikes a rather different tone. The Israelites are no different from the other nations, says Amos in this Haftarah. And taken together, they sort of, hopefully they can be synthesized into a healthy, a kind of self-confidence and pride where we are happy with who we are, but also recognize that we share the world with many others, and that we share God with many others. And the Haftarah will be read by Zach. It's on page 706. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nevi'im tovim v'ratzah b'divreihem hanemarim b'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habacher b'torah Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo u'b'nvi'ei hamed b'tzedek. Chalot hidnei Chushim atem li B'nei Yisrael nu Adonai Chalo Yisrael Heleti Me'eretz Mitzrayim Uflishti mikaftor Bar mikir Hinei Einei Adonai Elohim V'amlacha hata V'hishmareti ota Me'al Pnei Hadama Efes Ki Lo Hashmed Ashmid Et B'Yakov Nu Adonai Kinei Anochi Mitzaveh V'Hanioti B'chol Hagoyim Et Beit Yisrael Kasher Yinoah Bakvara V'lo Yipol Teror Aretz V'Acherev Yamutu Kol Hata'eh Ami Hamrim Lo Tagish V'Takedim V'Adenu Hara Bayom Hahu Akim Et Sukat David Hanofelet V'Gadarti Et Pitehen V'Arisotav Akim Uvniti Hakim Elam Naman Yeshu Et Sheri Edom V'chol Hagoyim Asher Nikra Shemi Alehem Nu Adonai Osezod Hinei Yamim Ba'im Nu Adonai V'nigash Choresh Ba'kotzer V'dorech Anavim B'mshech Hazara V'hatifu Hecharim Asis V'chol Hagvot Titmogagna V'shavti Et Shur Am Yisrael Uvanu Arim Neshamot V'yashavu V'natu Charamim V'shatu Et Yenam V'asu Ganot V'achlu Et Prihem Untati Ad Matam V'lo yinachu Od Me'al Ad Matam Asher Natati Lahem Amar Adonai Elohecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzorech kol ha'amim tzadik b'chol hadarot halel ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh
המדבר עם קיין, שכל דבריו אמת בצדק. נאמן, אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ונאמנים דבריך, בדבר אחד מדבריך, אחור לא ישיב ריקם, כי המלך נאמן, ברחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, חלל נאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי היא בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו, ברוך אתה אדוני, ושמח ציון בבניך. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ומלכות בית דוד משיחך, במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כיסו לא ישב זר ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נורד לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, מקדישה ולמנחה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Come on back. Before I offer you a Misha Berach, I want to invite Lori and Rob. Do you guys want to come up and share anything, one or two?
So I'm just going to say something really quickly, you know. I don't have to tell everybody that the world is crazy, as evidenced by the fact that this is the fourth time we've tried to have my son's bar mitzvah party. Well, he was bar mitzvahed 2 years ago at the wall at Bethel Synagogue, instead of the wall of Israel, which he was supposed to be at. He had the first bar mitzvah outside at Bethel Synagogue, and he had the first bar mitzvah inside at Bethel Synagogue on Labor Day. But he didn't really have Torah because they were both weekdays. And while my literary and biblical knowledge is a small fraction of the rabbis, I felt it necessary to quote Torah as his father. And what better than Kiddushim? Ki ish asher yikalel et aviv ve'et imo mot yumot oviv, which in the French here says, if anyone insults his father or mother, he shall be put to death. He has insulted his father and mother. Mazal tov.
So, I'm just
going to say a few words. So when I was 13 years old, I landed a major lead in my synagogue play in Long Island, and the show was called The Boyfriend. And it was about a young girls on the French Riviera at a finishing school in the 1920s. And I played Maisie Merriweather, and my dance scene required that I'll show you. I link arms. You put that down for a second. My dance scene said I had to link arms like this, back to back. Look, link my arms. There you go. And do a backflip over my partner, over my co-performer, over a cement floor in the social hall because we had no carpeting back then. This was about a month before my bat mitzvah, and my mother was a nervous wreck. And I didn't understand why. Mom, what? No big deal. What if what if something happens to you right before your bat mitzvah? So I want to tell you it was all fine and good, and I didn't wind up in a cast before my bat mitzvah, and I didn't, smash my head like she thought I was going to. But who would have ever imagined that I was going to have such anxiety and fears in planning my son's bar mitzvah, like we said 3 times and now the 4th time. We had a lot of concerns. And of course, like doing a play, when we planned Sammy's bar mitzvah in 2018, it was like, the worries were like you would in any theatrical production. Would his lines be right? Would my voice be there for me? Would my caterer follow my requests? Would the pictures be beautiful? And while I was nervous about these things, I enjoyed the planning process, and I watched each detail unfold and into place. But it never crossed my mind that I would be scheduling and rescheduling my younger son's bar mitzvah 4 times. So as many of us were convinced, COVID was going to be a thing of the past and we could resume normal activities. And I remember when I found out that I was pregnant with Zachary, I was thrilled for Rob and myself, but I was most thrilled for his brother, Sammy. I knew that secretly he'd have a partner in crime, and secretly they were going to rule the family, and that's true. They actually do. And truth be told, Sammy had a beautiful bar mitzvah celebration with his family and friends, and I only wanted the same thing for Zachary. So my heart was broken when we were told we could only have 20 people in the synagogue. But we were so grateful to be the first bar mitzvah back at Bethel. And after several months of watching Zoom broadcasts of other bar and bat mitzvah students in their living room reading out of a chumash, we were so grateful to be at Bethel in our beloved synagogue in front of our, and reading from the precious Torah. And, when we were so close to the 3rd time of having this bar mitzvah, we actually printed up the invitations. And then we had to cancel again because we just still were not, at ease with the fact that, that we could have a safe and healthy environment. So when we decided to reschedule this time, we said, we're going to use the original invitations. They came in the mail, but we're going to put an addendum. And Zachary has a great passion for baseball, so we said, they say 3 strikes and you're out. Well, we're going to take one more swing at this, that's for sure. So our family and friends now are in from out of town, and some are even in this room, and we're so delighted and thrilled that you are all here today. And while we're still anxious beyond belief that everything will be amazing, I think this is an important lesson in persistence and determination. And it's important that Zachary see that we just don't give up on things. We keep trying. In the words of Theodore Herzl, Im tirtzu, ein zo agada. If you will it, it's no dream. If you really, really want it, keep going after it and keep trying and try again. And, this might surprise you, but I've done a lot of praying in the last few weeks that things will go okay. And, but I know that things are out of my control, and I know deep down that things are not necessarily in Hashem's control. And yet I pray with all my heart anyway, because I find some comfort in reaching out. And I just pray that we'll have an opportunity to celebrate with our family and friends, because they're here today and they're with us at this moment, and we've lost so much time together. So we're really looking forward to this. So it took many, many years, but I finally understood what was behind my mother's fears when I did that flip in my dance scene when I was 13 years old, when she watched me. Zachary, we are just beyond proud of you. And from the time you were a baby, you've shown your determination and your strong will. And as an infant, you would have screamed 25 hours a day if it was possible. So we knew from the moment you were born that you meant business. From baseball doubleheaders to hiking 100 miles plus over 12 days with the Boy Scouts in the high desert of New Mexico, you are the never give up kid. And we know you're going to make your dreams come true. And for people that don't know this about our family, we tend to take on many things at once. We move very fast. We go from one thing to the other. And admittedly, there are friends and family that say, I'm getting tired just listening to your itinerary. But the point is, we don't give up. We keep moving, we keep going, and we keep trying. So our wish for you is this. Even at the most challenging times when it seems like the chips are down, take the chance. Take that do-over. Life is full of second chances, third chances. Sometimes you even need to take a fourth swing at things. Your Hebrew name is Ze'ev Meir. You're named after my Zaidi William of blessed memory, whose Hebrew name was Ze'ev, and it means wolf. And Meir, you're named for your Aunt Michelle, Masha of blessed memory, who was herself a very determined young woman. So your name means bright, shining wolf. And there's no question that you're bright. In fact, sometimes we think you're just brilliant. And pair that with your determination of a wolf, and we know there's nothing you can't do. So remember the words of Herzl. Im tirtzu, ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream. Mazal tov, Zachary. We are so incredibly proud of you and the man you've become, and we love you to the moon and back, and we wish you and everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Wow, applause on that. That's great.
And I will just offer you a Mishaberach for someone called to the Torah, not for a bar mitzvah. I was thought about giving you the bar mitzvah, but no, you've already had that. And I want to say, I don't know you that well, Zach, but I want to say how much I admire the fact that you came back and did this today. I hope it portends many, many, many other aliots and many, many, many other times when you come back to this community and others. So, Mishaberach Avotena Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech Et Zev Meir Shela Hayom Lichvod HaMakom V'Lichvod HaTorah V'Lichvod HaShabbat HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor Oto Ve'et Kol Mishpachto V'Yishlach Bracha V'Atzlacha B'Chol Ma'aseh Yadav Im Kol Yisrael Echav V'Nomar Amen. Mazal Tov Yeshar Koach. We will continue in the Siddur on page 148. Yekum Porkan Min Shemaya. Mishaberach Avotenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech Et Kol HaKal HaKodesh Hazeh Im Kol Kilot HaKodesh Hem Uvneihem Uvnatehem V'Chol Asher Lahem ומשם יחדים בתי כנסיות לתפילה, ומשם תוכם להתפלל, ומשם נמנה לאמור ויין לקידוש להבדלה, ופעל לאורחים וצדקה לעניים, וכל מי שעוסקים בצורכי ציבור ובעניין ארץ ישראל באמונה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ישלם שכרם, ויסיר מהם כל מחלה, וירפא לכל גופם, ויסלח לכל עוונם, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, עם כל ישראל אחיהם, ונאמר Amen. We rise and turn to the inside back covers of our Siddurim for a prayer for our country. Dear God, bless the United States of America and help us to preserve its cherished ideals of liberty, justice, and equality for all. We, your people, pledge to do all in our power to continue to strive to achieve our ideals, believing always that all members of the human family are created equal, endowed by you with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. May you inspire the leaders of our great nation to govern with wisdom and courage and compassion. We ask you to protect our courageous military, our first responders, and all who keep us safe. Let this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, and may it fulfill the plea of your prophet that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. Please, Almighty God, you establish his peace in the firmament, bring peace to all your yearning world, and let us say, Amen. And we continue with a prayer for the state of Israel on page 149. Avinu Shabashamayim Tzur Yisrael V'Goalo Barechet Medinat Yisrael Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu Hagen Aleya Be'avrat Chastecha Ufros Aleya Sukat Shlomecha Ushlach Orcha V'Amitcha L'Rosheya Sareya V'Yoatzeya V'Taknem Be'etza Tova Milfanecha Chazek et yidei meginei eretz kodshenu, v'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, v'atera nitzachon teyatrem, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam liyoshveya, v'nomar Amen. Ashrei is page 151. Ashrei Yoshrei V'techa, Od Yalelu Chasel, Ashrei Amjeka Chalo Hashem Shalom. Tehilat Adonai edaber pi, v'varecho b'asar, Shem Kodsho le'olam va'ed, v'anachnu nevarech Yah, ve'yadav ad olam. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Yizgav Shemo levado. Natati lachem torati al tazovu etz ma'imi lemakazikim v'tom cheha deushar Hashiv So I thought we would do a little bit of learning today because I think about a subject, an interesting subject, I hope, and an important one. And I think that parshiot like Kedoshim lend themselves to conversation much better than they lend themselves to sermonizing. I mean, you could give a whole sermon about one or more of these different laws, but I actually think when we're talking about society, so society is co-created, and society is a conversation about how our society should look. So I thought we would do that today. And I thought we would look at the subject of abortion in Jewish law, which is something that probably many of you in the room have studied before. But there's an old saying in the Gemara that the person who has studied the sugya 100 times cannot be compared to the person who studied it 101 times. And I really believe that is true, that new things do come out each time. And of course, though the Torah doesn't deal specifically with abortion this week, the Torah really deals urgently. This is the Torah that's most urgent about how our society should look, and how our laws support how our society should look, and how our judges make determinations about how our society should look. And Torah wants us to be urgently involved in the world around us, and urgently involved in its laws and in its politics. And many of you, some of you are guests and you're meeting me for the first time, many of you who know me now pretty well know that I am not the newsiest preacher that there ever was. I mean, a part of that is based on sort of my sense of good rabbinic practice, but part of it, to be honest, is based on inclination. I mean, I'm not usually drawn necessarily to speaking about the news, sometimes to a fault, perhaps. But I think this is obviously such an urgent issue in the country today, and it was obviously, of course, in the news so much this week. So I thought it'd be interesting to explore a little bit in that vein. So I'll ask a few people to sort of help me send these around. The other reason why I think it's interesting to study, and important, and actually inspiring to study this particular corner of Jewish law and this particular corner of the tradition is that, the rabbis, the ancient rabbis, and the Torah perhaps, I think from a contemporary perspective get many things right, and they also get some things wrong. The subject of abortion in Jewish law, and we'll explore exactly some of its particulars, is an area where I actually happen to think, this is my opinion, that the rabbi's position, so the very traditional position articulated in the Mishnah, is actually urgently relevant and actually has something invaluable to offer the present conversation, which often is not said. And I think it's both important on its own right, and I think it's also important and inspiring when we see the tradition say something what is so, in my opinion, deeply, deeply compassionate and deeply, deeply wise. So I thought, so we started this a little bit. So basically what you have here are not, and we're not going to look at all of these sources, are not every single important source about the development of abortion in Jewish law, but they are most of them. Most of the core ideas that at play when we think about termination of pregnancy in a halachic context is, I promise you, on this sheet. Of course, it's not entirely exhaustive, but a lot of them are here. And so the first, sort of the Jewish law, of course, in its embryonic form, which was actually an interesting turn of phrase just now, but Jewish law in its embryonic form appears in the Torah, and really most of the developing halakha around termination of pregnancy goes back to Shmot 21, 22 through 25. So someone want to read this for us?
I'll read it.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
And one of them pushes a pregnant woman, and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues. The one responsible shall be fined according as the woman's husband may exact the payment may be based on reckoning. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise.
Okay, good. And then, so very quickly right off the bat, and by the way, the reading or the misreading of this pasuk is what ultimately creates a very stark divergence in Jewish and Christian law about how abortion is understood. But what does this verse make really crystal clear? Yes?
That a miscarriage is not a capital offense.
That the death of an unborn child or fetus is not a capital offense. How do we know it's not a capital offense? Because it's just a fine. What's the punishment for a capital offense? Oh, the punishment for murder is death, right? And we know that it's crystal clear, right? Whoever sheds the blood of a human being, by a human being, his blood shall be shed. For in God's image did God make the human being, right? So the Torah's opening gambit, or opening sort of claim, from which all Jewish law ensues, is that the death of an unborn fetus, though important, is not coterminous, not legally the same as the death of a born person. Yes,
Does it matter in this case? The intention wasn't to make the woman miscarry; it was kind of like a side event. She gets pushed.
No, so it's interesting. No, so intention does not matter in this case. It also doesn't matter in the case of manslaughter. There's this issue of appears in Bamidbar or in Dvarim about the blood avenger, someone who's killed by accident has to flee to one of these forbidden cities because his family can pursue him and kill him even though he killed the person by accident. It's a good question. And the answer, at least in terms of development of abortion in Jewish law, is no. The fact that this particular case is a mistake, right? The man didn't mean to injure the woman, does not, as far as I know, appear in the subsequent discussions of this particular verse. Yeah.
I think that is emphasized because the second sentence, which talks about if other damage ensues, what the penalties are, life for life, etc., there's no mention of intention there. So it's almost as though it doesn't matter, even if you accidentally were to kill the pregnant woman herself, it wouldn't matter, you'd be put to death.
And by the way, I'll just say that the way early Christian interpreters of this verse understand the verse, based on the Septuagint, which is the official early Greek translation of the Tanakh, they understand ason, the word ason, which we render as, correctly I think, at least contextually, which we render as other damage. They render it as form. The word form, which I didn't bring the Septuagint here, but basically they understand that the life for life refers to the fetus that was lost. That's how early Christian interpreters understand this verse, and it appears in Augustine, and he creates this distinction between a fetus that has a form and a fetus that doesn't have a form. But they understand this to mean the death of the conceptus, not the death of the woman. We, of course, read this to mean if other damage ensues, i.e., if they kill the woman or if the man dies, right? That's what we understand it to mean, right? But they read it differently, right? Which creates a very large divergence. Okay, so any other thoughts about this verse or questions about this verse before we drag us through a few more sources? Thoughts about the verse? All right, so here's another source which, if you've been around Jewish community for a while, which many of you have, you may have seen before. So this is the classic Mishnaic treatment of abortion, from which really all Jewish law diverges. I mean, I'll bring a few other sources, but really, to explore and understand how Jewish law develops on this issue, I don't think you really need much more than this Mishnah. Because later interpreters really do hew very closely to this Mishnah, which is in Ohalot, chapter 7, verse 6. So someone want to read the Mishnah?
A woman who is having trouble giving birth, they cut up the fetus inside her and take it out limb by limb, because her life comes before its life. If most of it had come out already, you do not touch it, because you do not push out one life for another.
By the way, just as a point of detail, the way most of it comes out, does anyone know what Jewish law decides that means? That it requires a little bit of... Most of it means the head. That's what ultimately they decide, right? If the head is out, then the lives are on equal footing. If the head is not out, then the lives are not. That's what that ultimately means. And then I bring this next Mishnah because it's sort of... It puts sort of an exclamation point on what is the early rabbinic perspective. So, and it's often cited in these conversations. So, Marty, you want to read the next one too?
Sure. If a woman is about to be executed, they do not wait for her until she gives birth. But if she already sat on the birth stool, they wait for her until she gives birth.
Okay, so we don't need the rest of it. We actually don't need the rest of it. But it's a really striking...
The next thing is interesting, actually, and I think applicable.
If a woman is executed... Okay, go ahead. Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, do you see it as? I mean, how do you see it as related to the question? Well, before I ask Margie that question, I just want to stress what a striking statement. I mean, it's a macabre situation, but it's a rather striking statement about the ancient. We're talking about the Mishnah. We're talking about rabbis living in the year 0 to the year 200. It's a rather striking statement about the extent to which it was very clear to them that an unborn child is not a person, is not a legal person that has rights absent other kinds of competing rights, either the right of the mother to life, or in this case, the right of the mother or the right of the community to put the mother to death, which is quite. I mean, it's macabre, but it's also a strikingly strong. It's a strong, resounding ruling that the unborn child is not a legal person. Marty, how do you see the hair thing as being related?
It's interesting because I feel like it emphasizes that the woman is a person and that actually her hair has value. She is alive and her hair has value because you can sell it for wigs and things like that. And then an animal has been executed is forbidden.
No, not if she's alive.
Yeah, she's dead.
When she's dead, yeah.
You take a wig.
Right.
But if an animal has been executed, it's forbidden to use it. There's other texts and things like that. I just think that it emphasizes the woman's personhood. Somehow for me, I don't know why.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, that's interesting. All right. So.
Gary has a.
Yeah, Gary.
I just want to say the balancing that you said between society's interest in executing the woman versus this unborn child or whatever. It's actually more stark than that. It's the community's interest in executing in its time. There's not even a willingness to delay.
Right.
So that's even a more stark kind.
It is stark. And by the way, it's a little bit of a tangent, but we think about the way the rabbis think about capital punishment. There's no such thing as death row. Like that's not a thing. The way it works is you are on trial before the court. You're convicted and you're executed then by the two witnesses that convicted you. In other words, you need two witnesses to prove a probable case, and you're executed then. Yes.
Well, basically, the law is what you said. However, they put so many roadblocks in it that if a Sanhedrin executes one person in 70 years, it is considered a bad Sanhedrin.
That's true. So, okay, the whole case. That's true.
Roadblocks in it, so that in effect there is no capital.
That's true. The rabbis basically legislate capital punishment out of existence, which is a long and interesting tangent. I'm going to focus us back a little bit, but it's a long and interesting subject in Jewish law, for sure. All right, so I want to just expose us to a few other concepts, and then important concepts in sort of abortion in Jewish law, and then we can have a bit of a discussion, and we'll move on with Musa. So on page 2, so this is, we don't need to read necessarily the context of this in the Gemara, but in the Gemara, which is, follows the Mishnah, and then over the next, so Mishnah is 0 to 200, Gemara is 200 to 500, let's say, of the Common Era. So there's this statement which I have rendered here in this strange kind of, I don't know what you would call that, brownish color. It was supposed to be orange, but it didn't come out that way. We don't need, I'm just going to zero in on the statement of Rabbi Yehuda here. So what is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda? He holds a fetus is considered as its mother's thigh, i.e. a part of its mother's body, yerech imo, which is an important conceptual thing also in the development of abortion in Jewish law. So so one way, not the only way, by the way, we'll see, but one way of construing the conceptus, right, an unborn fetus is in the same way as you think of your hand, or of your ear, or something like that. Okay, so any thoughts about that, by the way, before we... Yes, Peter.
So again, it's emphasizing the unborn fetus is part of you, part of the woman. It is not separate, doesn't have its own separate conception and its own separate rights. So just as a woman can deal with something dealing with her hand or her thigh, she can deal with a fetus in the same way.
Yes, but when can she do? What can she do to her hand or her thigh? Not anything. This is important conceptually too. What are you allowed to do? What sort of interventions are you allowed to? Like, can you have cosmetic surgery according to Jewish law?
I would imagine if you need to do something to your hand to protect your own health.
That's right.
You can do to your hand what you need to.
Not only can, but must. Right? So if your hand is gangrenous, not only are you allowed to cut it off, you're actually not allowed not to. You are mandated to. And if someone says, hey, listen, I want to see how this goes, I really love my hand, Jewish law says they're supposed to say, no, that's not an option for you, because ultimately your life is not to do with what you want to do with it. It's you're supposed to take care of your life because it's a sacred property. Yes, Rhonda.
I was going to ask, isn't there a prohibition on self-mutilation?
Right, of course, yes.
Does that extend to mental health?
Which is why. Well, so wait a minute. So that's going to be I'll do one more concept here, and then we'll get to that. That's going to be ultimately the way in which rabbis are going to disagree throughout history and still today about what constitutes a danger to the mother's life. So the Mishnah is quite clear. If the mother's life is at risk, her life supersedes the life of the unborn fetus in all cases at all times. Not only, and by the way, it's striking actually, by the way, the mother is not allowed to say, save my baby. Right? So you could imagine maybe, right? In a C-section, let's say, the mother says, okay, which before modern medicine, when a C-section ended in death, the mother is not allowed to say, save my baby and take me instead, according to Jewish law. Right? It's an interesting thing. Right, and so where rabbis are going to disagree, and we'll look at two very prominent 20th century poskim who said different things about this, about what constitutes danger to a mother's life, and whether we are only talking about immediate bodily danger, like high blood pressure in pregnancy or any of these kinds of things, or whether we think more holistically about danger to life and include things like mental anguish and context in which the baby will be raised and so on and so forth, and the quality of life for the child, the quality of life for the parents and other siblings and so on and so forth. And that is going to be a point of disagreement among contemporary rabbis. Most of them go one direction. One other concept that's important to that's important to understand here, and I'll just sort of talk it through rather than look at the text, which is from Sanhedrin. But there's a category in Jewish law called a rodef, who is a pursuer, who is someone who is, pursuing someone else to kill them. So if you are aware that someone is planning to kill you tomorrow because, I don't know, someone told you they put out the hit on you and this is the guy that's going to do it, what halacha says you are supposed to do is actually get up early and kill that guy. That's what you're allowed to do. And there are different ideas to what extent this really applies, especially because the fetus is, of course, not doing this volitionally. Right? If a fetus is threatening the life of the mother, unlike a classical rodef, who is a person volitionally choosing to pursue someone else to the death, the fetus is not doing that. So there's some question about to what extent this category really obtains. But but the fetus is considered in some ways a pursuer, right? And so the laws of just as you are allowed to and perhaps even required to pursue your pursuer at the expense of your pursuer's life, so too the fetus is sometimes understood as a rodef in certain kinds of ways. Though the rabbis are, and it's an important point, the rabbis are hip to the fact that the fetus is an innocent life. Like, that is true. They are not going to deny that, which I think is sort of, it's being rhetorical a little bit, it's sort of, in my opinion, absurd to deny that a fetus is an innocent life. The halakha is going to say sometimes it's okay to take an innocent life, but the rabbis are going to be very clear on that the fetus is an innocent life.
Although,
yes.
Is it not that it's 40 days after a woman, I believe there's a sense of, there's another text that you don't include.
Yes.
That, like water,
Mm-hmm.
that the embryo is, they didn't use that term back then, but first you wouldn't know that you were pregnant until you started, if you lost your period, or until movement started with you.
The quickening, yes, the quickening, yeah.
So you wouldn't know unless you had ultrasound
Right.
until that, and then you still have 40 days.
Yes.
People say past missing the first period, you have 40 days after that, that if you lose it, or if something happens, or whatever, it's still considered not, and remember, we don't even do the pidyon then until 30 days after, because babies died then.
Right. So there's the it's slightly different, but you're right, Maryut. It's an interesting point which I sort of didn't bring on this source sheet because it was Lebanon, because it is so interesting. I'll just share it. There's a conversation, and it's not entirely settled in the Gemara about when, like, the soul enters the body, and there's an opinion of 40 days. There's an opinion when the child first says Amen, which is actually very, very late if you think about that. So there's the question of personhood, and you're right, like, you don't have traditionally full mourning for children who die, right? Die early, right? So the notion that personhood is actually an emerging quality is something that's alive at work in the rabbis, but from the perspective of laws about abortion, it's not really material, at least in terms of how the halakha develops. I'll share just one interesting thing that I shared with Adam earlier this week. There's and it's not Socrates, it's Aristotle, thought that the soul enters the body the first time the child laughs. And it is truly a beautiful teaching from, and I'm not supposed to go with Rambam went with Aristotle on a lot of things, so maybe you went with Aristotle on that. All right, we'll share two other texts, and then we'll move on. So I brought, and I will sort of talk, you can read them sort of as I talk if you wish. On pages 4 and 5, I brought two tshuvot, contemporary or 20th century Jewish legal opinions. One from Reb Moshe Feinstein, who was the most important posek of the 20th century, at least in sort of the modern and centrist Orthodox world in America, a hugely important figure in Jewish law. The second is from another hugely important figure in Jewish law, a guy named Eliezer Waldenberg, So Eliezer Waldenberg is the most, I'll just say a little bit about who he was. He is the most important expert in the field of Jewish medical ethics, Jewish law and medical ethics in the 20th century. And his opinions specifically, he was an important halachist in general, but his opinions specifically about medical ethics are hugely influential throughout the Jewish world. And if there are any medical ethical halachic questions that come up, the first place people look is always Eliezer Waldenberg and Tzitz Eliezer, because he answered so many of them. The reason why he did is actually, it's interesting. He was the rabbi at a small synagogue on Jaffa Road, adjacent to the Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. And doctors would come, daven mincha or say Kaddish or whatever at the shul, and they would ask him questions. And over the years, this became a major field of interest for him. Moshe Feinstein basically rules very stringently and says he basically says in the first paragraph, the exception would be to save a life of the mother during childbirth, right? You could only, basically says you can only save the life of a mother if she is dying as a direct result of the pregnancy or during childbirth, but not for any other reason. Not for not for mental anguish, not for any other reason. And Tzitz Eliezer, Eliezer Waldenberg says the opposite way. He says basically that we take into consideration much more holistic kinds of concerns about, cases of rape and incest, but also mental anguish and also, other kinds of family situations. And he says that those things count as things that threaten the life of the mother. And this is the dividing line, this is sort of the seam around which these discussions turn in halacha. And I think, I think it's fair to say, probably in the sort of center modern Orthodox world on left, Eliezer Waldenberg is really authoritative in this area, and I think most, the vast majority of rabbis that I talk to think that, you can expand the category of risk to life further than, just immediate kind of bodily harm. But some rabbis don't. And that's kind of that's kind of the state of the conversation about abortion in Jewish law. Any thoughts about that before I editorialize a little bit and we move on? Or questions, or? Yeah, Gary.
So, if there are instances where it's permissible or allowed, and those where it's not, who's the judge?
Say that again?
Who becomes judge?
So who decides if the risk is great enough? Right. It's a really good question. And one of the, I think the sort of the traditional halachic answer would be, talk to your local rabbi, right? Yes. But, right? It would be. Which is problematic in any number of ways. One thing, but that would be the traditional answer. And I will actually say a little bit more about that in a second, but, because I have a thought about that. But.
Yeah, I just was taking note that the closest that you get to some issue of viability in this whole discussion is when the head comes out. That's, you don't have any distinction. Your first mom just learned you're pregnant, whether it be for the miscarriage situation,
right,
or anything else. And I just found that sort of interesting.
Right, viability. Right, it's not. You're right. It's not a question. Viability is not a question. Eliezer Waldenberg. By the way, one thing that worth mentioning from the Tzitz Eliezer, he also permits aborting fetuses based on genetic abnormalities, like Tay-Sachs, but crucially, all traditional halachists, and Eliezer Waldenberg is a very traditional halachist, is going to locate that in the experience of the mother. Not in, you might say, you might make the decision, and I will speak, I'll share personally, Phyllis and I did make this decision to abort a fetus based on the quality of life that the fetus would have. Also, I suppose it was based on our anguish as well. But halacha locates that in the needs of the parent, not in the needs of the child, which is, I mean, interesting. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, but that's where halacha locates the concern. Any other thoughts about this? Yeah.
It's very interesting differentiating between inside the mother and outside the mother. Because that's, in many ways, that's very easy to imagine, right? Like, once you see a child, you're not going to want to harm anything
Right.
from a child. I think where it gets really murky for me is all the way back to the beginning where, there's only a fine if a woman is pushed and loses her child, because women who have had miscarriages feel very much that a death has taken place.
Yes.
And that there's a whole thing about there's no way to grieve this baby, because it was not yet visible outside of her body. So
Yes.
it's messy.
It is messy, and I'll share a little bit. I mean, that's very poignant for me. So it's part of. I mean, this doesn't define Phyllis and my life and family and whatever, and it had a happy ending for us. But we went through one very complicated pregnancy loss, which involved sort of a late termination because of something called trisomy 13, which is a horrible genetic abnormality, which is not really compatible with life past a few minutes. And but it changed. It did, I think, alter my sense of all of these things, which is something that I'm happy to. It doesn't have to be about me, and I'm happy to speak about that more if you want. But I think one thing that a lot of studies of sociological studies of attitudes towards abortion demonstrate, and maybe this is sort of obvious, but they demonstrate it anyways, which is that these people's opinions tend to be very plastic, based on experiences that they have had. I am in a different place because that's part of my experience than I think I would have been if that was not part of my experience. Which, as you say, I think Felissa in particular really experienced as a death, and I think, and I did too. But I think for her, as I think it, yeah.
So I guess you were saying you experienced it as a death, and it was the right decision for you and your family, and I totally understand that. But this lovely lady over there was just talking about just because we can't see it. But I do ultrasound, and I've been doing it for 40 years, and any woman in here who's had an ultrasound and miscarriage, they experience death in that moment. So on page 1 you said in Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds the blood of human beings, by a human being shall his blood be shed. For in God's image did God make the human being. So he's saying God made the human being. Well, if at the end of life, life stops because we don't have a heartbeat, then when does life start? A heartbeat. And a heartbeat is 22 days after conception. I see it on ultrasound about 5.5 to 6 weeks. And I see little arms and little legs, and I work closely with this anesthesiologist who had an ectopic pregnancy, and out came a little just sac with a little baby at 7 weeks. So my feeling is that abortion in general, and not in your case, okay, because there are exceptions, but just for convenience is another holocaust.
Say that again?
Is another holocaust.
Just for convenience. Well, just for convenience is also not, the halachic position either, right? That's why the halachic position is slightly and by the way, I think we should be very careful. There are very few people in the world who get abortions just for convenience. It's not that's not a very common thing. Women get abortions for all kinds of different reasons, but very few of them get it just for convenience. I think it's just important to say. But halakha does not locate the permissibility of abortion in the right to choose. Right? It locates it in a recognition of the fact that there are very, very complex competing values, and ultimately the arbiter of those values and the people that the Torah clearly states are most important with respect to those values are the living people that are in front of us talking to us and saying, I'm in pain, I'm scared, I can't do this, or I can do this, or that those are the people we ultimately listen to. But you're right. I mean, the notion that philosophically we locate abortion in a right, sort of an abstract right, is not the halachic position. It's not. Yeah, John.
I think it's interesting that a lot of these laws and interpretations are by men who have no idea what it's like to go through a pregnancy. And I think that's part of the issue, because really this should be from a woman's perspective. A lot of these laws and interpretations are from a man's.
So I agree with you, John, 100%. Amen to that. I agree with you 100%. I also think it will take one more, and then we'll move on to when we could talk about this all day, and we can during Kiddush. But I will say that I find this is why, one of the reasons why, I find the Jewish position, the halachic position, to be sort of deeply, deeply wise and deeply compassionate. I mean, it is by men, but I think it's deeply compassionate to recognizing two things at once, that there is a life that one is ending when one makes the decision to terminate a pregnancy, but that there are also countervailing values and situations which render that not unpainful, right? It's still very painful, but render that permissible in many cases, and in fact mandated in many cases, right? Or perhaps in all cases, right? It's an interesting thing to think about, but if the only reason why an abortion would be permissible is because your life is at risk in some way, well, once it's been determined that your life is at risk in some kind of way, it's not actually your option anymore. You must terminate the pregnancy, which is why, though the Jewish position doesn't fit neatly into the contemporary pro-life or pro-choice kind of a paradigm of an American law, Jews could have to oppose a situation where abortion is illegal, because in fact that infringes on Jewish religious freedom, because Jewish law states clearly that there are cases when abortion is not only permissible but mandated, right? So that position is not in keeping with Jewish law. The position that you have the right to choose is not entirely in keeping with Jewish law either. But the position that right, if it was illegal, that would infringe on Jewish religious freedoms. Yes, Maryu, have the final word. A woman should have the final word.
In terms of the compassion, I want to emphasize the compassion that nowhere in these texts or Jewish law does it say that the woman should be put to death, whether because of the baby, any of these situations, unlike the state of Alabama. And the second thing is that I worked for over 12 years with infertility support, and living through people going through all sorts of making decisions for children that they desperately wanted. And again, I love Judaism because of this in this case. These texts show compassion in a way that unfortunately many still today having difficulty with. So I love this, and thank you, Rabbi, for doing this.
Well said, Maryu, and I think well said, Maryu, and I think that part of why I brought this was because it's an important contemporary issue. Part of why I brought this is it moves my heart and warms my heart when there are places in our tradition that seem to me to be so contemporary and deeply wise and deeply compassionate. And it's not the only one, but it is one that I think is very, very striking. We will continue with Musa. Thank you, all of you. I would be happy to, of course, continue the conversation at Kiddush or another time later. We'll continue with Musaf on page 155. Lori. Please rise.
Yikadash Shemei Rabbah, V'alma Divra Kirutei, V'amlik Malchutei, V'chayechon V'mechon, V'chayedecha Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala U'bizman Kari, V'imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach, Le'alam Ulal Me'al Maya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yibar, Yivar, Mimetzeh, Yidadar, Vitalei, Vital, Shmei, Kudesha, Rikola, Elam, Min, Kol, Berchata, V'shirata, Jishbata, V'nechemata, Tamiram, Yama, V'imru, Amen. Page 156, B. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Koneh Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei V'nehem Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Fakir Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham U'Foked Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye Metim Atah Rav L'Hoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechakel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye Metim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Ba'al Givurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit, Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah la'achayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hametim. Naritzecha v'nakdishcha kisot siach sarfei kodesh hamakdishim shimcha b'kodesh kakatuv al yad neviecha v'karazel ze v'amar Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech ha'aretz kivodo, kivodo malei olam, Mesharta shvalim ze lazeh, Ayeh mekom kivodo, Le'umatam baruch yomeru. Baruch Yivor Adonai mimkomo, mimkomo, hu yifein berachamim, beyachonam, ham yachadim shemo, erev avoker, bechol yom tamid, ha'amayim be'ahava, shema omri. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Vehu Yashmienu, Verachamav Sheni, Yot lachem le'Elohim, Adonai Elohechem, u'divrei kodshecha katuv lemor. Yimlach Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion ledor vador. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, ledor vador, ledor vador. Ledor vador nagid god lecha, ledor לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, כי המלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. יאי ניי 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 ניי, יאי ניי 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 ניי, יאי ניי 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 ניי, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Page 181.
Yikadav yikadav shemei rabba, v'amadura kirisei v'yamlik malchutei v'chayechon v'yamachon v'chayetcho beit Yisrael, b'agala u'v'zman kari v'imeru. Yehi shemei rabba mevorach, l'olam olam me'amayayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei kudesha. B'rechu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata damiran v'yama v'imeru. Tikabat odavon avohon dechol Yisrael kodem avohon di v'shmaya v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom alinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. 1 and 2. Ein keloheinu, ein kadonenu, ein kemalkeinu, ein kemoshienu, micheloheinu, michadonenu, michemalkeinu, michemoshienu. No del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Malkeinu, no del Moshienu. Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Atahu Shetiru, Avotenu, Lefanecha Eketoret Asami. 23, Aleinu. Aleinu Leshabeach La'adon HaKol, Latzet Gedula Liotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu Kegoy Ha'aratzot, Velo Samanu Kemishbechot Ha'adama, Shelo Sam Chelkenu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, Va'anachnu Korim, Umishtachavim Umodim, Lifnei Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Notei Shamayim v'Yosed Haaretz, Umoshav Yikaro b'Shamayim Ima'al, Ushchinatu Zo, B'Gavhei Meromim, Hu Eloheinu Ein Od, Emet Malkeinu Echad Sulato, Kagatu בתורתו, ידעת היום, ידעת היום, להשוות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים, ממעל ועל הארץ, ועל הארץ, מתחת עינו לעינו. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושמו
This week, we observe the Yartzeichen of Dora Cabin, grandmother of Daniel Cabin, Helene D. Weber, a founding member of the PJC, Egon Radvani, father of David Radvani, Edgar Reed, father of Lydia Reed, Ted Silverman, father of Doris Pat Smith, and also Perry Cantor, who is memorialized on our board. May their memories and the memories of all those whom we recall be blessings. Mourner's Kaddish is page 134. Yitgadal v'yitgada shemei Rabbah Be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Ba'gala u'bizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpahar v'yitromam v'yitnasei Vitadar, vitale, vitalal, shmei dekudsha b'reichu. Le'ela mikol birchata b'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, huya aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yasher koach to Roger for Psuke, and to Julia for Psuke, to Joel for Shacharit, to Sammy for the Torah service, of course to Zach for reading Haftarah for us, and to Lori for Musaf. It is my pleasure to invite up our Executive Vice President, Andrew Rothberg, to make the announcements.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom. I'm sure I join everybody in wishing Mazal Tov to the Weber family, to Rob and to Lori, older brother Sammy, and of course to the Bar Mitzvah Zachary. Very important question. I want the answer. I know my buddy over there, John Casper, wants the answer. Mets or Yankees? Oh, man. Mets.
New York.
You're not from the Bronx. That's right. That's okay. Not from the Bronx. Mazel Tov, Zachary. Okay, and thank you very much for sponsoring Kiddush. Thank you. Adult education. I can't do this. Join Rabbi Resnick at the shul Tuesday, 7:30. Final 2 classes, May 10th and 17th on the complex Life on King David. Please bring a Tanakh to class. Lunch and Learn, Mishnah Chug, meets on Wednesdays at 12 on Zoom through May 25th. May Book Group, join us Monday, May 7th, it's Monday, May 16th at 7:30. We'll discuss Prague Winter, a personal story of the remembrance and war by the late Madeleine Albright. This will happen via Zoom. Wednesday, May 18th, 6:30. Yeah, Lag Bomer barbecue in support of our Baal Tefillah position. Rain date the next day. Please look in the announcements.
The most important is the klezmer. This is what I asked for. Klezmer music and fire breathing or dancing or something like that. Lag Bomer is the barbecue holiday, as we'll call it, the barbecue holiday of the Jewish people.
It's all about barbecuing?
Well,
Yeah.
All right, all right.
So we're having fire, so this is gonna be like crazy amazing.
There's gonna be
Okay.
a kebab competition.
But you have to sign up.
A what?
So you know how many.
A kebab competition.
A kebab competition. I signed up last night, Beauty, you don't know about this, but I signed this up. I signed up last night. I'm really excited. Sounds great. Music program with Dan Perkis, Sunday, May 22nd, 10:30 a.m. For an analysis of Broadway show tunes. Those of us who go to Broadway a lot know that Broadway's Jewish. You know, hello, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Stephen Sondheim, Rodgers and Hart. Who else? Jerome Kern. Leonard Bernstein. Who else?
We could go on and on.
We could go on and on. Okay, so for more information, look at the weekly announcements. Save the year for the PJC Gala, Sunday, June 12th. Dinner's at 5:30 in congregants' homes. One of them's going to be at my house, so I'm excited. Followed by a reception at PJC at 7:30. Tikkun Olam, the PJC continues to help hearts and homes for refugees with the resettlement of 2 refugee families in New Rochelle. More volunteers are needed. Please contact Michael Dworkin. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything about that, Rhonda? I know this is...
If anyone's interested in volunteering, they can email me also after Shabbat.
Thank you.
It's an ongoing project, and it's going on for months and months.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'll make one note before I invite Gary up for one quick announcement as well. The music program with Dan Perkis, I am aware now that is the same day as the Israel Day Parade, so it is currently scheduled for them, but it may move if... I'm not sure. I haven't talked to Dan, but just FYI, that is the same day. So yes, Gary.
So, the rabbi and Andrea...
How about so you can hear on the...
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just 60 seconds.
Okay.
So the rabbi and Andrea and I have been talking about a couple of things. One is how do we connect our shul to more Klal Yisrael was one of the things. And the rabbi and I were also talking about how do we make Israel part of the conversation at the shul more when we have the opportunities to, especially with the Israel trip maybe coming up soon and all that. So woohoo on that. So I was looking today at the Parsha, and on page 694, you have a mitzvah, a very important mitzvah. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. And that's in the Hebrew there, it's veleket kitzircha lo telachet. So leket, I just want to let you know, is there's an organization. It's one of my favorite charities, and it's in Israel. I think it is the largest food rescue organization in the world. And when I was in Israel in February, I had the opportunity to visit at its logistics center, and it's just like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, tons of food that they gather. A lot of it is like things that couldn't go to market, ugly fruit kind of thing, and deliver it. It's an amazing logistic thing. So think about our connection to other Jews and to Israel. Leket, go L-E-K-E-T. I recommend you go online and find it, and I hope it'll be one of your favorite charities too. Thank you.
Wait.
Just
since we're Mets fans, I'm sorry, Yankees fans. All right, ready? Now you knew I was going to do that. Adon Olam Hashem Alach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Le'et Nasa V'chepsel Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hoveh Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara Ve'hu Echad Ve'en Sheni Lehamshilo Lehachbira Veli Reshit, Veli Tachlit, Velo Ha'oz Ve'hamizra, Vehu Eli Ve'chai Go'ali, Ve'tzor Chevli Be'etzara, Vehu Nisi Umanos Li, Menat Kosi Be'yom Ekra, Be'ya'ado Avkid Ruchi, Be'etishan Ve'a'ira, Ve'im Ruchi Geviati, Adonai Li Velo Yira. Let's go, Mets. We love you.
I was just having to work that out.
I want to tell you something. We did this we had to work that out.